Where is God? There's some things about which I'd like to speak with you over these next few months. Fundamental things about faith, about life, about human existence itself. Matters that hold us in the faith, and without which there is no faith that can hold us. To start at the beginning, there is this simple, endlessly complex question. Where is God? Some of you I know have been following these days American historian of Christianity Diana Butler Bass on Substack or elsewhere as just one more signpost of grace, hope, and sanity amid the political and social chaos around us. It was nearly 6 years ago, in still the first year of COVID, that we held a Zoom class here, based, I say here advisedly, based upon her book, Grateful, the Transformative Power of Giving Thanks. It seemed to make sense in those days as COVID meddled with our moods, not to mention the health of a nation, not to mention the health of a world, a planet. But we were still meeting safely online, and I headed those days, each of my sermons at the top of my sermon manuscript, I headed each of those with these words, the church is the people, if for no other reason than to remind myself of that fact, and to place a marker in the sand, if you will, the truth that the church is not here in the building, but everywhere you are, and you, and you, and you, and Sue Taylor, and Diana Gossard, and Beth and Celeste, and Lynn, and Robbie, and Sandy. So that it wasn't a great surprise that that first lesson of the class, themed to gratitude, focused in fact expressly on that other where question I just mentioned, the fundamental faith question, where is God? Diana Butler Bass was arguing that the essential W question we need to ask of God is not who or what God is, but where God is. It is the where question, she posited, that ultimately answers for us the who and the what question of God. At least this is how I processed that lesson now 6 years ago. So, here is the where answer most of us inherited. That our God is an up there God. Up and away. In heaven somewhere. That this up there God of our inheritance is seen typically as old, white, and male. And most importantly, that this God, this up there God, is embodied, it's placing him somewhere that is not here. This is the image we're taught, most of us. And even if we no longer see God like this, we aren't entirely sure of the alternative. Well, Butler Bass argued that God is not an up there God somewhere, but a here God present, incarnate in our midst. And I don't disagree. In fact, I proclaim this faith over my entire ministry, and I'm not alone. But what does it mean exactly? I'm asking today. Is proclaiming God is here enough? Does this settle the question? Does it solve the riddle of who then God is? Or do you and I require more, especially now in this era as science-based thinking has come to permeate all serious conversations of faith? and human existence. God is here, great, got it, but how? Here where? These are serious questions having to do with not only the nature of God, but the nature of, well, everything. Let me put it this way. In the old inherited worldview, the one of my childhood and yours, I imagine, everything is separate, not intimately connected, including God or the gods, all of whom had their distinct place, Valhalla, Olympus, the Christian heaven. God might come down now and then and mingle with mere mortals, even become incarnate in one now and then. But essentially, God was away, separate, because everything was separate, isolated, mechanistic. This was the worldview and the God of our inheritance. Now, however, we know that's not true. We know this in space-time because of Einstein and the theory of relativity and quantum mechanics, that everything is intimately connected. We know it over time because of Darwin and evolution. Everything evolves more or less gradually and fluidly, occasionally more abruptly, so that where we came from in the evolutionary chain still lives in us. Cases in point: the human tailbone, the appendix, wisdom teeth. They may still serve some function, but each of these has ceased to serve its original function. Their purpose has evolved at best. And science has learned a lot about the universe based upon this shift of perspective from a mechanistic to an organistic, interrelated view of existence. But the more science comes to understand, the more it understands that it does not understand, if you know what I mean. The true shape of reality is still largely a mystery, folks. So here's my question. Are we allowed to think of the God we worship in as equally open a way? Is it possible for us to love, to trust one that we openly admit we will never be able to conceive, who will remain shrouded in endless mystery? Is it possible that we don't have to be able to measure God, experiment on God, even locate God, by some mystic GPS or something, in order to commune with God? How big is our God? Any more than we should dismiss gravity because it won't be understood. Don't dismiss it just because you don't know what it is, please. Einstein described gravity as a curve in space that wraps around an object. His concept works about like Isaac Newton's did for centuries, just a little better. The difference is mostly conceptual. And someday, Einstein's model will have to give way to another. Relativity theory is not the end of science's quest for truth about gravity or the universe. Are we Christians likewise capable and willing to reconceive our thinking about God? Is this so difficult for us? Is this so difficult for us given a faith that originates with Jesus? Jesus who pulverized all kinds of pet rocks about everything, from who our neighbors are, to how we should treat our enemies, to the ultimate meaning, power. Is this so difficult for us given a faith later shaped by the Apostle Paul, who exploded countless myths about the limits to the lengths of the love of God, that God would go to bridge differences of race, status, religious sensibility? Paul, who was invited to stand, as we read, in the Areopagus in Athens, that amphitheater, where you could hear a pin drop from the very top, so that the wisest of its citizens could mock him, but who spoke instead of the one in whom we live and move and have our being, quoting their own wisdom right back to them because their mystery and Paul's were not so different. And because faith in God, a God of love, doesn't erase mystery, it revels in it. For all his foibles, and Paul had foibles, he understood this. Same in our time. There are so many things that might bring us all together in the blessed divine mystery, if we would just choose to embrace it without insisting on pinning everything down, to stop judging everything by what we know that others do not. Like, where is God? Not an old white man up in the sky, remember? Rather, here, present with us, as Diana Butler Bass and so many others have insisted. But again, what does this mean, really? I'm asking a hard question. I don't even know how to ask it. But I'm not the only one asking. Many of us have this question. So, God is present with us. How? Where? Okay, so you see, I've gotten this far this week with my sermon, and then I read it all back to myself, and then I began to try and square it with where my real head and heart had been all week. This is the problem, you see, with living with your eyes open to what's going on. There's much to say, because there's much to feel and much to process. I read it back, and then I began to try and square it with where my real heart and head had been this week, which was somewhere that seemed at first completely unrelated to what I just shared, until I realized it was not unrelated at all. No, I believe the question, where is God, is at the heart of everything about our faith. We don't have to create scientific proofs for the existence of God. We cannot will God into being, make God exist. God is God because God is God. As Kat read in Exodus 15, God says, I am that I am. Or some of you will know a better translation, I will be that I will be. Or even I will be what I will be. Or maybe I will be where I will be. Plenty of mystery in this Hebrew phrase itself. God's nature and activity don't answer to us. God's nature and activity are dynamic, evolving, not static. God does not reside in our idea or mental construct of God. God, rather, for us, lives in our experiences of the holy. This is what our Bible is, a compendium of the impressions, experiences, and encounters with the sacred, with holy God, by first a people and later a movement, written and compiled over roughly 1,600 years of time. That's what the Bible is. And here is one overarching claim, that wherever you are, whatever you are living through, God is there, present. And here's another one. God is found at the moral center of every moment, every season, every age. And God is revealed in us as we stand for the ethical heart of love, which is nothing less than the care of the neighbor and the sacrifice of ego in the face of human need. That's where God shows up for us. And this brings me exactly to where my head and heart had been through these ruminations this past week, to the state of the United States of America at this moment in history. As I've been thinking about the abstract question, where is God? I've been wrestling with the existential question, where is God? With the moral question, where is God? And I have been doing so this week in the face, as I know you have, of a 38-year-old mom shot 3 times in the head for nothing. Nothing. She should not have been there to die, because an ICE agent should not have been there to kill her. Because it is easy to ask, so, Wyatt, where is God amid such reckless, needless tragedy? And moreover, amid such callous and reprehensible false narration of its reality and meaning. In a growing culture of lies, in service of a shameless grab of unconstrained power. Where is God in the midst of such soulless deceit, Wyatt? I'll tell you where it is. I'll tell you where it is. God lives in the rising up of voices of protest at such carnage. God lives where people stand up against such things, where people show up on cold city streets from Minneapolis to Indianapolis and bear witness to what is wrong and what is right, where people shout the truth, record the truth, spread the truth, so that there is no question about the truth. God lives where churches provide sanctuary, food ministries provide sustenance, refugee ministries provide resources for those vulnerable under assault. Wherever we bear witness by such deeds, God is present, bearing holy witness. God lives in the retired Mennonite friend of Donna's and mine, fluent in Spanish, who had spent time on the mission field in Latin America, who weekly meets with detainees at the Miami ICE facility in Bunker Hill, Indiana, hearing the stories of these migrants who have no idea what fate awaits them, painstakingly connecting them to their families who have no idea even where they are. Going on just down the hallway of Children's Church this morning, God lives as they are learning a lesson about the Beatitudes. Our young ones, our children, lives who are impressionable but are learning their hearts and minds. They are catching the meaning of morally empowered lives of love. God lives in all places that counter cruelty and despair by insisting on the superior power of love and mercy. God is everywhere that goodness shows up, compassion stands up, and courage rises up. This is my proof of God. And it's no proof at all. I don't need that proof. It is proof of life over death, and that's enough. It is proof of love over hate, and that's enough. It is proof of help over harm, and that is sufficient. God is here, where we notice and name such things. For finally, all of this is nothing other than the reality of that ancient Galilean vision, the life and the witness of Jesus, whom we Christians call Emmanuel, God with us, the church's witness to the Spirit, which our faith still claims to be at work in us and in the world for goodness' sake. And wherever it is at such work, there is the where of God, where God is, and the what of God, and the who of God, and all the proof or assurance we need.